Cobalt-60 contamination in the city, Juarez in northern Mexico in the year 1983. This event was listed as one of the worst nuclear accidents in the history of Latin America. Has been so little told that has remained in the collective memory, although cannot be compared to the magnitude of events like Chernobyl. Our history combines ignorance, omission and corruption that resulted in a disastrous event. It all began with an irregular purchase in November 1970. The Specialty Medical Center, a private hospital in Ciudad Juarez, clandestinely acquired a unit radiotherapy with a source radioactive cobalt-60 from States United. The problem increased because entered the country without documentation necessary and without supervision. What caused its storage in a cellar for 6 years due to lack of trained personnel for its handling. Already that since it is an illegal purchase, hospital could not request training for the correct use of the machine. Went up to December 1983 when they decided to get rid of the device since it took up space and there was become obsolete. The task fell on the shoulders of the maintenance technician from the clinic. Called instruction from his superior, it was simple to sell it as scrap to a local junkyard as a reward. Vicente could earn some money. In reality that did not matter since the priority was to get him out of the facilities. There are two versions, different from what happened here later. The superior would declare that Vicente was sneaked into the hospital one night and he stole the machine to sell it to the black market, without knowing that it was a team dangerous on his part. Vicente explained that it was not a robbery but that the superior himself had asked him to get rid of the machine and others hospital junk without explaining the why. It was not at all that it was about a radioactive nucleus is not known. It's true that neither of them was prosecuted as responsible, although undoubtedly the worst. Vicente took part of it. Vicente, oblivious to the danger, who was lurking, proceeded to disarm, to facilitate your handling using common tools. In the maneuver they pierced it and left escape the cobalt granules in the van and along the route towards the boneyard. After carrying out the sale at the scrapyard were from returned to their homes when the truck suddenly it shut down due to radiation. Since they couldn't start it, they left it parked on a street near the downtown Ciudad Juarez by approximately 40 days. All this time outdoors and in an area residential very close to the Rio Bravo. They later managed to bring her to the front to Vicente's house where he stayed parked for 10 more days before being affected by the authorities. All this time emanating radiation by the cobalt contamination. 16 Meanwhile at the junkyard, for more than a month the cylinder radioactive was contaminating the scrap and even the cranes that were used for the handling of said metals. Contaminated material began to be sold to several major foundries that supplied steel to a large part of Mexico and some areas of the United States. Among them were companies of Chihuahua, Durango, Monterrey, and San Luis. On the 16th of January 1984, at Los Alamos National Laboratory, from New Mexico, a center of nuclear research founded by the Oppenheimer himself, the director of the Manhattan Project and creator of the bomb atomic. He had several detectors installed. Radiation, nuclear. The purpose of these detectors was to prevent radioactive material that is handled inside the laboratory was illegally extracted. In the vehicles that he abandons in the center when the truck with load contaminated past closed the alarms, they turned it on and after a quick investigation located the route of the contaminated truck that would take them to the origin of the Isles Radiadas, the factory of Aceros de Chihuahua. Later, they notified the National Commission of Nuclear Safety and Safeguards in Mexico to contain the incident. During the investigation, managed to trace the entire route of pollution. They found the truck, who had moved the cylinder radioactive which had been almost 2 months in the open air, and when they found 10 seabirds, almost the triple a lethal dose, and determined to temporarily store it in a fenced park called El Chamizal for avoid direct contact with the civilians. Upon locating the truck, were able to interview Vicente, who he declared himself a steward at the hospital of where the device came from, and after the investigations managed to discover the irregularities in the purchase and the poor that there were no records of the machine. They also discovered that the dump Phoenix was seriously contaminated and that the material that had been sold to the foundries had been used mainly for the manufacture of 3,000 table bases and 6,600 tons of rod which had been distributed in various cities of United States and at least 15 states of Mexico planned a cleanup for the streets of the city where there was, circled the truck and picked up about 30 particles of Cobalt-60, scattered through the streets of the city. Juarez, which meant a very difficult since each cobalt granule, it had a measurement of 1 millimeter diameter, although the recovery of the radiated material tracking the contaminated sites and the plan to clean up the Lozos immediately began. The health of the population was already in risk, so the authorities opted for build cemeteries for the remains. Nuclear plants in Ciudad Juarez, specifically in the desert of Samalayuca and others located in Baja California, where they lie buried and isolated metal debris materials, and the truck of Vicente. Around 4,000 people were exposed to radiation. Cobalt in an incredible way. Vicente and friends survived his certs of radiation more than double a dose. Lethal. The contaminated people presented symptoms such as headache, nausea and fatigue, although no casualties were recorded. Mortals. The Mexican Institute of Social Security had to follow up by 15 years, although it is said not to be completed the task of 6,600 tons made of material contaminated were recovered. 2,360 tons unused, and they inspected more than 17,000 buildings where it was suspected that he had been used contaminated rod from the which were demolished. 814 due to high radiation levels. However, it is suspected that not all of the scattered material was recovered due to the technology available in that moment, so there could have been conciones contaminated anywhere in Mexico, although for the present the radiation from such remains should have almost disappeared. Complete. Vicente maintains that he never. They warned that the machine was dangerous and that had no labels where it was. Explain any risk during some time was harassed for causing what today it is known as the Mexican Chernobyl. The alarming number of 62 cases of loss of radioactive material in Mexico, of which 22